Welcome. This is our presentation on solar PV as a mitigation strategy at Western. This is something that's very near and dear to my heart as it revolves around a lot of the research I've been doing all year. Really excited to get this going. I don't think it's going to work because it's...
Keep it going.
How about that? All right, so like Sam said, solar PV is a mitigation strategy specifically addressing the university level here at Western right now. According to UNEP, there's a quick quote on mitigation right there. Solar fits very neatly into that mitigation strategy as it's a carbon neutral, once it's set up, way to continue to produce energy so we can sustain our lifestyle and continue to learn with lights and whatnot.
So in 2008, former president, Western President Jay Hellman signed on to the President's Climate Commitment, which is a national voluntary initiative that was established in 2006. Originally, 284 colleges and universities in the country signed on to commit to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Now, depending on the university, there are various avenues to achieve that. Western committed to reducing emissions by 20% by 2020, 50% by 2035, and then actually achieving neutrality by 2050.
So how are we getting there? Currently, Western is buying renewable energy credits in the form of wind credits from a power supplier out of Nebraska. There's actually two tiers to the way that we do this. The first tier is an actual renewable energy credit, an REC, that costs about less than 1 cent, less than 1/10 of 1 cent per kilowatt hour, and that's kind of an added value that incentivizes wind development. It's so cheap because it's just kind of added on to the current production of electricity. So we buy about 1,921,000 kilowatt hours worth of these credits, which offsets about 20% of our electricity. We also buy 700,000 kilowatt hours of deliverable wind-generated electricity from the same supplier. This comes in at about 6 cents a kilowatt hour, or about $42,000. The difference here being, rather than a value added to that electricity, we're actually paying for the specific deliverable electricity generation. So how they account for that is the renewable energy credits created by this deliverable generation. Those certificates are directly transferred to Western. Those account for about 8% of our offsets at a significantly higher cost due to the fact that we're technically directly receiving that energy. Again, the effectiveness of these credits are what we're using to offset our emissions. There's a lot of backdoor policy that goes into this. How viable is this? A lot of questions, really, more than answers. But currently, those are offsetting about 28% of Western's emissions.
We really see this as a gap in a mitigation strategy to adhere to that President's climate commitment to reduce that emissions. We really believe that there's much easier and more effective ways, specifically on site, to reduce our carbon footprint and emissions.
So this graph here is speaking to Western's electricity consumption. This was created by a student, Gabe Stevens, who created a feasibility study for what renewable energy technology would be the most effective on campus. The blue line is the actual energy use used by Western from July of 2012 up until June of 2014, and the red line is the trending, the overall trend of this. You can see that over the last 4 years, and if we extended this onward, it would definitely continue on this trend as we develop our buildings on campus. So overall, the point is Western's using more energy every year, hence more greenhouse gas emissions. So kind of to give you guys a story behind our proposal is of solar PV on campus. In 2012, ENVS 400 student created a renewable energy fund. It's a voluntary fund. Students can pay $15 if they'd like per semester. Currently, it's generating roughly $30,000 a year. The current balance is right around $160,000. So So this is going to go towards a project that will hopefully be implemented on campus. So a lot of my research has revolved around trying to figure out where we would be the most effective in offsetting these emissions. So I kind of profiled energy use on campus, which is what this graph represents. This is each building's on campus, a combination of the natural gas and electricity use, which translates to energy use intensity. That is energy use per square foot per building. You can see a lot of variance between each building here, but basically the take-home message from this is how much energy is each building using on a square foot basis. Obviously they're not all equal. If you'll skip to the next one. These are also the associated greenhouse gas emissions with that energy use. So when we're looking at implementing a renewable energy technology system on campus, we would want to look at a building with a higher energy use and therefore greenhouse gas emission.
Because again, these technologies are still decently expensive for solar, so it would be kind of improbable to, at first, with the limited funds we have, implement it at all buildings to reduce all electricity. So looking at this, clearly there's some that would benefit more from having electric or from solar panels.
It's kind of nice to notice Kelly Hall here. Leading the charge. So, with our money and some interviews I've done with local electrical engineers, Dave Stevens, the student who helped put together the original feasibility study, I was pointed in the direction of this NREL PV Watt software, which calculates site-specific potential of solar installations specific to Gunnison's climate and weather patterns. So roughly for the $150,000 or so we have for a renewable energy investment, we could expect to generate roughly 67,000 kilowatt hours per year from a $150,000 system. That sounds good, but in reality that's less than 1/2, or about a little bit more than 1/2 of 1% of total campus energy use last year. So based on some back of the napkin calculations, if we really wanted to offset all emissions on campus with distributed generation, we'd be looking at a capital investment of about $15 million.
So, to continue our argument for mitigation conditions for solar, in Gunnison are quite lovely, really. We receive over 300 days of sunshine per year, about 9-14 hours of sunshine, depending on winter and summer. For snow, that would be a concern up there, but since those things retain heat, they actually melt the snow, or they can be shoveled off so that they can continue to receive sunlight and continue to produce energy at the highest possible output. And then again, we have limited smog, fog, air pollution, really not that much rain, really not that much fogs to really block the potential of solar reaching the campus. So we have a map maybe that will show at the end. Wind for this area is not actually looking quite as good, even though it's ridiculously windy this time of year. It's really just seasonal and it's not quite as advantageous. We wouldn't be able to make as much energy with wind and other popular renewable energy mitigation techniques. So solar really seems to be the best bet.
Sunny Gunny for a reason.
Oh yeah.
So branching off of Gunnison having ideal conditions for solar voltaic components, we also wanted to give you guys a snapshot of the energy market on a national scale. So this points out that in 2013, our U.S. electricity generation capacity increased by 15,000 megawatts. From this, wind and solar supplied 35% of this increase, while natural gas and coal provided 56%. The very next year, in 2014, again, energy increased by 15,000 megawatts. However, this had a very different picture. The share of wind and solar additions grew to 47%, while the share of natural gas and coal fell to 49%. So this is a pretty evident piece that although our energy consumption is increasing, resulting in higher levels of emissions, we are offsetting that with a bigger piece of that coming from solar and wind capacity. Overall, at a national scale, solar and wind make up 9% or 6% of that portfolio piece. But when you break it down by year, you can see that individually it's gaining ground pretty quickly. This graph just demonstrates that, how much solar installation is growing and is forecasted to grow. This was from the Solar Energy Installation Association website. And again, this graph just kind of demonstrates that although technology was fairly pricey to begin with as far as the solar cell and components to put in installations, they have gone down dramatically and have dropped from $1.86 per peak watt in 2013 to $1 in 2012. This graph is really interesting. It shows the national solar grid parity and what is projected to happen by 2016. What's important here is understanding what grid parity means. It is the point where the PV generated electricity equals the cost of electricity purchased from the grid. It's interesting to note here that states up in the northwest are cloudy and rainy, so that's not quite happening there, but we're kind of addressing and maybe even offsetting that in the American Southwest where we have plenty of sunshine. We're kind of happy to see that up in the northeast, they're actually, New Jersey, surprisingly, is actually one of the leaders with solar generating capacity. Again, this graph just kind of demonstrates and outlines state by state where we're at as far as solar per capita.
Yeah, and we'll see later in our slides a few of our examples are from Arizona, which is probably the leading state with solar, and due to their just plentiful amount of sunshine. And it is quite interesting to see New Jersey and a few other northeastern states up on the top there, possibly due to just political ideology and just leaders in those states maybe being a little bit more for these renewable energies, but certainly in the American Southwest, including Gunnison, it's very feasible for solar.
So we've talked about the great potential that we have here on campus to utilize solar power generation technologies. We've talked about the decrease of cost associated with production of solar panels and the increase of the use of these technologies around the country. We thought it would be relevant to just brush up on a little bit of the rich history of the technological advances of photovoltaic technologies. It was in 56 where the first silicone solar cell was created. It was at about 4% efficiency. Just 4 years later, that increased by 10% to 14% efficiency. Then moving on, 94, we were up to 30% efficiency. That was our NREL, that's over there in Golden, Colorado. Now this is not typical, but the end of 2014 in December, researchers from Germany and France found a way to utilize technology to create panels that were up to 44% efficient. Now, this is not typical. Typical panels run from 20 to 25%, but it's important to note that we do have the technology, and if we can bring the cost down, we can definitely increase our efficiency almost by 2. So
The cost and efficiency is both, well, yeah. The efficiency is going up and the cost is slowly going down, so hopefully this will be a good mitigation strategy as we continue into the future.
now, this chart, as intimidating as it may look, was published by NREL. Now, it's really neat because it does provide a great overview of the exponential increase of technologies in the last 40 years. You can see we were up to 44% this year. And then over here in the top left corner, these are just an overview of some of the different technologies that folks are investing in. So we're going different directions to kind of figure out, the least cost with the most efficiency. So this is kind of a neat visual.
Yeah, I'm going to be discussing in just a second here at the University of Arizona, the solar park. Most of these industries like IBM, and this is just outlining the different companies that have really started investing in these technologies. At the University of Arizona Solar Park is really where this research is occurring.
This is kind of neat. I don't know if you can see, this article was actually published yesterday. Folks at Stanford have found a way to increase the efficiency even more than 44%. Now, they didn't go into the exact amount of increase of the efficiency, but they did specify some nanotechnology that's involved. Unfortunately, at the time, that technology is very expensive, but the rate we're going, we really see a lot of potential in further increase of efficiency or decrease of cost.
So this chart is just outlining, bringing it back to universities. These are some of the top universities that have been able to implement solar panels and solar technology on their campus. We go through these top 3 here, and kind of some ways that they were able to go about that. So back to the solar zone at the University of Arizona Tech Park. This is like a broad overview. It's kind of split up into sections where different companies are able to invest in acreage of land. And along with research, it also has like this competitive advantage where they all have this tract of land. How much electricity can each of those companies produce with that tract of land? So I think this is really the future of how we're going to see more and more technology come about. So just a little bit more, it produces 23 megawatts of power from just that area. It's over like quadruple the amount of energy it actually takes to run that facility. All of that energy is put back in, or most of it's put back into Arizona's grid, and then also goes off to other areas and supplements a lot of the energy that the University of Arizona uses. Over 165 acres with 95,000 solar panels in the solar park. So this is just a further zone of how it breaks up. Yet again, you can see IBM, Apple's got a section there. Apparently Vail Middle School and high school have some areas there. So over 10 stakeholders, just people who are interested in really developing this technology.
It's a research playground.
Pretty much, yeah. And the next school, the second school with the largest capacity is definitely ASU. They have a total generation of 24.1 megawatts. That's enough to power almost 3,366 Arizona homes, and it reduces substantial amounts of greenhouse gases, 7.5% of their carbon footprint, and over 23,000 metric tons of carbon per year equivalent. So this is kind of how they have done it at ASU. A lot of their buildings have these solar panels on top of them. ASU is really proud of their solar program. It offsets almost 50% of their peak production area from just solar. Yet again, Arizona sees a ton of sunshine. It's a perfect place for it. And this is just some equivalents. I mean, 3.7 billion pieces of toast. That's a lot of toast. And then our last school that we'll look at is in New Jersey. Yet again, surprising enough, they do have a lot of fog and clouds up there, but they're still able to push through their solar program, and all of theirs are on their covered parking. I know Western really doesn't have as much parking as a lot of other universities do, but we do have ample amount of space on our building tops for this. But these guys, over 1,000 homes per year could be offset just by how much that is going on in here. So 32 acres, 8 megawatts of power, pretty substantial. But yet again, it is coming with that cost there. So. And this is just taking a quick look at our solar that we have currently on top of Kelly Hall. We have 4 panels up there, 2 PVs that go to the electric needs, and then thermal solar hot water panels that help with the hot water and heating. So I was playing with that computer in Kelly. On April 7th, that was 40 kilowatt hours of power that was coming through, which is about 5% of what the building needs. So in the grand scheme of things, it's a great educational opportunity. However, it's really not providing the substantial amount of energy that a whole new program can kind of bring to Western here. Still, since its inception, 92.64 metric tons of carbon has been offset by just those 4 solar panels. So if we were able to increase that, Western's mitigation efforts would be substantial, and maybe we could get on the graph of being some of the most effective at reducing mitigation efforts for schools. So Sam's going to go into this a little bit later. There is some substantial roadblocks in terms of policy, in terms of contractual agreements with energy companies. The way that Arizona and New Jersey are able to, but specifically Arizona is able to look at and have solar panels on all their universities is that they pass an ordinance for a state law that any sort of solar technologies that are directly influencing the grid for research purposes are allowed to, they're allowed to investigate those and use those on universities. So we have some roadblocks that Sam's going to kind of go into here at Western.
And before our roadblocks at Western, I think it's important to note that we are working with Arizona University, Arizona State University, University of Buffalo, some of the more progressive schools in terms of on-site renewable capacity and kind of consulting how do we start to overcome some of these roadblocks. I would say the biggest one is the fact that Western pays 5 cents per kilowatt hour for our electricity. That's less than half the national average. That's due to the fact we get a discounted commercial rate. That really disincentivizes any kind of investment in these technologies. So this is, again, from that NREL software that I ran, and it establishes a kilowatt hour price for the type of system that we're looking to install. It comes out at about 13 cents a kilowatt hour. Pretty close to the national average, but more than double what we're currently paying. So in calculating the return on investment of these systems, we're looking at about 17 years before these systems would pay themselves off. Based on a life cycle of 25 to 30 years, that still generates 8 to 12 years of free energy. But continuing on the path of business as usual, that still requires more than twice the cost of just paying our electric bill. But I think we're going to have to, where's the incentive? We're going to have to start quantifying different ways of accounting for these values and in reducing emissions. I think, Rachel, you talked to Brooke?
Yeah, I had an interview with Brooke Moran. She's the coordinator of sustainability here on Western's campus. And she was pretty frank in suggesting that it's going to take more than feeling good about the environment for our campus administrators to switch over our energy profile. She suggested that it's going to be the bottom line that's going to dictate this. So again, we've got to quantify that to them and provide evidence over and over again that it will come through in their investment.
So this is kind of at least one thing that we can kind of feel good about looking away. So this is a graph of the City of Gunnison's electricity fuel mix. I think what I'm kind of trying to point out here is that the national average of renewables plus hydro is right around 13% of total fuel. The City of Gunnison is about 41%. So what that means is that the emissions per unit of energy consumed in Gunnison and on Western's campus is 3 to 4 times better in terms of reducing or not even emitting those emissions as the national average. That's good and all, but I think we can do better. So the big takeaway is I had an interview with the City of Gunnison's Public Works Director this week, and this is a project that I've been working on all week. He informed me that due to part of the reason why we have such a discounted rate for our electricity is that we sign these really long-term contracts, and part of that contract is that we're not allowed to generate our own electricity. So even the solar panel on top of Kelly, while minimal as it may be, is technically in breach of contract. I think they kind of let that go because they saw the educational value in that solar panel. But I mean, this was a development that happened 3 days ago where we found out that we have $170,000 or so in this fund that's generating $30,000 a year, specifically allocated for building renewable energy capacity on campus, yet due to our contract, we can't produce any energy on campus. So this is something that I'm going to be working on in the next months, year, to try to get that policy changed. And I think the city might be receptive of doing that, but I would really ask that if anyone has any ideas or would like to collaborate on working towards that policy change, I think we can definitely make it happen.
Because it definitely is possible. That's basically what Arizona did, was say anything at an educational university or can see the educational benefit from generating power on universities was foreseeable and was allowable, which has allowed Arizona to expand dramatically, especially at ASU and the University of Arizona. So yeah, that's it. If there's any questions or anybody knows how to fix this problem, let us know.
Okay, Sam, you and I were talking about this contract. Did you figure out how long the duration of that contract?
They're looking, it's actually up for review this summer, potentially.
And I guess the second point was that, until then, and so it's not that long, but if we were tied into this contract for longer, you would probably be best to start investing that money in, I don't know, some kind of fund so that you could make more money off that money instead of just having it
Right,
sit there.
and there's actually, that's really cool that you mentioned that. There's some undergraduate students who are kind of working in development with Sustainable Action Committee to start what's called a revolving green fund, so that any of these savings in efficiency improvements and the savings from renewable energy technologies will reinvest into the fund to further development. Go ahead.
And so leading up to the summer, perhaps what your group can do is look at, let's say, total installed capacity at ASU or U of A or some of these other schools, Rutgers, and perhaps come up with various metrics, right, that you could then share with administration, because I think administration, especially now, right, newer administration is very interested in showing their leadership across other collegiate institutions. And so if you could show, hey, you know what, ASU has, you know, so many kilowatt hours per student or per research dollars or whatever that may be, perhaps, you know, we could strive to kind of meet or surpass those various metrics as we kind of also try to renegotiate these contracts.
Yeah.
So yeah, consider that, but in the meantime, are there any kind of solid payback mitigation strategies that you could start considering, perhaps taking back to SAC while using this student fund? Perhaps behavioral change, right, within the campus population, both at the faculty, administration, and student level. Are there any other things like that?
Yeah, I think absolutely, but at the
Any
same-
examples?
Sure.
What about the new Quigley renovation for this building? We could use some of those additional funds to LEED certify to any other
I think they're looking
mitigation.
at passive solar potentially, you know, there.
Just building more skylights or anything, yeah.
Offsetting emissions in the first place by functional design is a
Yeah.
key piece to any kind of renovation. And even a lot of the new buildings and developments here on campus address that. But Quigley would be a perfect opportunity. And we've seen rooms and sketches, suggestions out there where our rooms could have humongous windows for purposes of education as well as possible, not having to run lights when you're in the classroom on a sunny day, and even a passive gain. Yeah, our lovely baseboard heat over there that roasts us out regardless of the temperature. Yeah, just functional design could really go far in these situations.
I think it's important to note though,
Education.
that the fund was set up specifically to be earmarked for renewable energy. But in speaking with electrical engineers, you know, they will tell you that all efficiency improvements should absolutely be implemented before we look at renewable energy implementation in terms of offsetting electricity use. So kind of looking back at that energy use intensity on a square foot basis, I think you can definitely highlight some areas where efficiency improvements could be made.
I actually wanted to address the behavioral piece of that because I think there's a lot of potential on campus at the grassroots level to save a lot of energy. Where I went to school for undergrad, we had a competition called Do It in the Dark campaign. And so the dorm buildings competed to save the most energy. I think it was a 2-month-long competition. And it was at the cost of a pizza party. The dorm who won got a pizza party, and it actually saved a lot of energy. And it opened people up to the idea of shutting the light off when they leave their dorm for the day.
And I think these are campaigns, right, that are low investment, but high return.
Yes,
Definitely.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because like Sam said, just how cheap electricity is, and then the people living in the dorms, they pay us flat rate for utilities. They don't care if they leave the lights on or anything like that. So yeah, I think that's really beneficial.
I saw the slide that showed all the different top schools producing renewable energy. I think there was at least one other Colorado school in there, CSU maybe. But I'm curious whether there's any sort of regional network between campuses where other campuses maybe in Colorado or we have the ones in Arizona are thinking about the same things. And is there any opportunity to exchange information and share that and collaborate with each other and learn best practices and what's worked and what's been challenging?
I think that's a Colorado State, you're right, John. Like I said, we have been in contact with Arizona State, pretty, just on the surface to start. University of Buffalo, we've been looking at their models. But this is kind of a project that's just starting to develop and kind of gain some momentum. I think there's a lot of people who are working on this who don't even necessarily know that we're not allowed to produce our own electricity yet. So that's going to be a meeting on Monday. So this is really all, we started this project a few weeks ago in terms of this class, and this just kind of hit the wall
2 days ago.
on, yeah, on Wednesday.
But I think that's an interesting point, John, because you could, as far as like developing a network and even like regionally, like maybe branching out to Adams State down in a similar climate and then even out to like Mesa, where maybe they're warmer, but they're all kind of operating the same student load, capacity load, and just maybe compare, get ideas and exchange of information and maybe start developing that idea of what that could really empower us to do and maybe bounce ideas off of getting out of purchase power agreements, contractual obligations.
I think it's gonna take students making some noise and kind of coming together.
Just a quick technical question. You staff talked about how they've increased the efficiency of these things tenfold since they were invented.
Yeah.
And then you talked about how on the return investment, these things only last for maybe 25 years, it sounded like. Have they been, through design features, been able to up that number more and more too? Is that somewhere that they can look at? So, maybe thoughts on it?
Yeah, yes, short answer, yes.
Right?
Yeah, I'd like to hear about, land use. That's one thing that comes to mind when I think solar. Is there, would the amount of generation here on campus, does that require a ton more land, or are we just talking rooftops?
It's a lot of discussion. What's most likely has been discussed has been rooftop. Like right up in, the most recent decision was actually to just put it on Kelly, which was funny because when you look back at the graph, Kelly's environmental footprint was significantly small in terms of emissions and our energy use per square foot, but at the same time, it's the most efficient building we have on campus. With the type of investment that we're looking at, we could pretty much offset all electricity use with the 40 kilowatt array on the roof. But there's a lot of concerns there. Most students don't even know that those PV panels are on the roof of Kelly.
Yeah, and I thought that would be a unique opportunity too, if there are re-better or redoing quickly, why not use that opportunity to try and just build it so that everything's south-facing on the top with the windows, but also just perfect areas to maybe put all those panels up there. And maybe it means that they will have enough to put on 2 buildings or 3 buildings maybe. I mean, at ASU, it's like over half of their buildings all have solar panels on there.
Would that generate enough electricity to mitigate power consumption?
With the current proposal we had, I know you looked at the numbers, it wasn't enough to completely sustain the entire campus, but it would put us probably on this chart for sure in terms of the amount of energy we take and how much we would offset with.
Thank you, guys.